Professor Satsangi obtained his master's degree in 1961. He served as lecturer in electrical engineering at Banaras Hindu University from September 1957 to May 1963 and reader in University of Jodhpur from May 1963 to November 1964. Professor Satsangi served Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi for 28 years in various academic capacities such as assistant professor, associate professor, and professor of electrical engineering, while also holding various important positions in administration such as head of department, dean undergraduate studies, dean industrial R&D, and managing director of Foundation for Innovation and Technology Transfer. He worked as honorary director, Diyalbagh Educational Institute from May 1993 to March 2002. Professor Satsangi has been holding his current position as Chairman Advisory Committee on Education, Diyalbagh Educational Institutions since August 2002. Professor Satsangi's major contributions are in the field of applied systems engineering, including socio-economic systems such as transportation and energy systems. He was the founder president of System Society of India from 1981 to 84 and the first chief editor of its Journal of System Science and Engineering called Paritantra. He has published 90 research papers in refereed journals and has attended several national and international conferences. He has successfully guided 35 PhD scholars. He has been the recipient of several prestigious awards, including the National Systems Award, Lifetime Achievement Award conferred by IIT Roorkee, and Times of Systems Movement Award conferred by System Society of India. Professor Satsangi was acclaimed the spiritual leader, the 8th son Sadguru of Radhaswami Faith, Diyalbagh, on 18th May 2003 through consensus in a special general body meeting attended by about 25,000 representatives of Radhaswami Faith, with a following estimated to be about 500,000. We request Professor Satsangi to enlighten us with his vision talk. Professor Satsangi, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ellis has already laid the excellent foundational groundwork in a superb presentation that we all had the good fortune of listening to. First and foremost, I am deeply beholden to System Society of India and the organizers of this twin event of Joint International Conference on Applied Systems Research and 33rd National Systems Conference, for giving me this opportunity to share with you some instances of my learning experiences in cooperation with the colleagues in the Diyalbagh Educational Institute, which probably could be described as applied systems research. I am indeed overwhelmed by the presence of distinguished, outstanding personalities in this auditorium from the various walks of life, particularly what comes to be described as systems, science and practice. In order to understand the motivation for the applied systems research for better worldliness that I wish to present, it is necessary to look at the educational and research perspective at the Diyalbagh Educational Institute. And I draw upon some of the excerpts from the speech of Sir Sahib Ji Maharaj from his convocation address to graduates of Agra University, delivered 75 years ago. Education, more education, education made perfect is the only panacea for our country's ills and evils. And that continues to be our faith in supporting the DEI system of education here for bringing about better worldliness. Also, Sabji Maharaj himself said, and I quote, "And as universities are centers where great teachers sit to teach and talented scholars assemble to learn, this agency alone will be competent to meet the world demand for the superior type of man." As Professor Ellis has traced, in the earlier period, religion dominated and preached unworldliness. Then came about the present dominance of science, and it teaches worldliness. But we are votaries of better worldliness, neither unworldliness nor worldliness. And somehow, as you notice from this excerpt, and as I mentioned in my remark at the end of Professor Kalra's excellent presentation, religion and theology are banned from the universities in the current situation. But theology is assuredly a branch of human knowledge, and so is religious experience a branch of human experience. This is very remarkable that Providence has located within the human body, apart from the mind, a special spiritual faculty. When that faculty is developed in us, like our physical and mental faculties, we shall be able to perceive truth and realize ultimate reality in the same manner as we now perceive and realize the sun with our physical eyes. And when this takes place, you will be both astonished and amused to find that truth, the goal of science, ultimate reality, the goal of philosophy, and God, the goal of religion, are but three names of the same supreme essence. DI educational policy, as formulated by the founder director, revered Dr. M. B. Lal Sahab, whose portrait you see in this hall, was to bring about physical, intellectual, emotional, and ethical integration of an individual with a view to evolving a complete man who possesses the basic values of humanism, secularism, and democracy, and who is capable of giving a fuller response to social and emotional challenges. Our object here then in creating a so-called Superman who would imbibe all the qualities of physical faculty, mental faculty, and spiritual faculty. And this would then be the true achievement of the goal of education. In Sanskrit there is a proverb, sa vidya ya vimuktaye. That is education which leads to complete emancipation. I mentioned the systemic context covering a fairly wide spectrum so as to prepare a preface for my presentations. Lately, we have been looking at two features. On one side, graph-theoretic omni-quantum field modeling for transcendental systems of consciousness, and on the other side, graph-theoretic quantum field modeling for quantum computation and information processing systems. And I find that they both have considerable identity. And one can research in one area and equally translate these to the other one in a large measure. Man as a microcosm has these three features of faculties, the inner core being the spirit force, the periphery or secondary covering being the mind, and the outer frame being the physical body. And there is interaction among these. Similarly, the macrocosm has these three big divisions. In fact, the microcosm, human microcosm, is a sort of mirror reflection, not quite the mirror reflection, but sort of mirror reflection of the macrocosm. In place of the inner core, here we have the infinite outer periphery, which is the infinite source of spiritual energy. And within it is Brahmand, the region of universal mind. And then within that is the region of physical universe, which we are trying to explore through science currently. This is the model that I have presented for providing some understanding of spiritual domains, both for the microcosm as well as the macrocosm. Apart from the well-known across verbal sources and through verbal sources, all that it entails is the conceptualization of a resonance operated switches, and these resonance operated switches operate through sound currents. In short, if one meditates and practices what we call Surat Shabd Yoga, that is the union of the spirit force with the sound current from the reservoir of spirit force, then we have a passage available to reach that reservoir. By traveling up this sound current flowing from the spiritual reservoir, the spirit forces can make a journey within one's own self without going anywhere, so as to witness the so-called ultimate reality at the highest level. Not everybody is fortunate to reach the highest level, but there are many experiences on the way, and each of it is highly enlightening. So while we explore the real physical world through our external senses, there is a much larger segment of the macrocosm which remains unexplored and can only be accessed by turning ourselves inward and exploring it through our inner senses, through intuition and such other mechanisms of perception. This is a lineograph for the same one. However, since scientists would not be convinced of this kind of modeling framework and its explanations without experiencing these, we also made an effort to see what we could do at the level of the physical to make indirect scientific measurements of spirituality. The fundamental axiom of spiritual system theory is that the spirit force is the primary source of energy. Even within the human microcosm, we are powered at the primary level or the core level by the spirit force, and it's when that spirit force leaves the body and the mind that a person is pronounced dead. It's pronounced dead because of heart failure, then mind dead, and finally spirit force has left the body, so he is absolutely dead. This takes place in steps. In this way, we visualize that this spirit force, which is the prime source of energy, has evolved into various mental and physical forces when it blends with the different kinds of media, that is, mental and physical media. So in this physical universe, it takes the form of one of the four fundamental physical forces of nature. And the one which is easiest to sense is electromagnetic energy. So if we were to measure electromagnetic energy, electromagnetic wave, and then relate it with the spiritual activity, for instance, in measuring the spiritual consciousness of the Albach community, we would make these measurements in our prayer hall, congregational meditation cum prayer meetings in the community hall. And we would see that there were distinct markers to correlate the spiritual activity with the measurements that were taken. However, to begin with, our measurements have been of low sensitivity and quality. We hope to acquire SQUIDs, superconducting quantum interference devices, which are very sensitive magnetometers, and then we are likely to improve the quality and sensitivity of indirect measurements of spirituality. In the last two National Systems Conferences, we have indeed presented research papers on these indirect scientific measurements of spirituality. Now I'd like to relate our experience about 5 years ago. We had, in fact, attempted to evolve a consensus through systems approach among the adherents of Radha-Swami faith, so as to achieve the lofty ideal of fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man. In this process, we were able to communicate with about 20,000 people who were sensitized about this approach and the problem, and find a solution to it. The consensus building techniques used were the commonplace ones like nominal group technique or the idea engineering approach, Delphi studies, and the scenario building exercises. About 1,000 people out of these 20,000 had actually participated in interactive seminars held throughout the world at different locations. We have what we call satsang branches. There are more than 500 of these, most of them in India, some of them in Europe and United States and Canada, but most of them in India. And finally, 300 of these people participated in intensive workshop sessions in Dayalbagh. And this is what they came up with. They set forth three major objectives for achievement of this lofty ideal of fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man. Better worldliness, rendering selfless service to mankind, and evolving a complete man with balanced physical, mental, and spiritual development. The obstacles that they perceived in attaining these objectives were ego, temptation or greed and other passions of humans, selfishness. And the solutions they proposed were to engage regularly in community service, religious service, and spiritual practice for ascension of intuitive consciousness. Provide education, more education, and education make perfect, and thereby inculcate various values. Set up habitats which facilitate leading exemplary life of better worldliness. This is so because our faith does not believe in any propaganda. And the only way we want to convey our way of life is by living it and demonstrating it as an example, without advertising it or without making any propaganda for it. So this is how setting up habitats where such better worldliness could be practiced as an exemplary way of life became important. So that's one of the projects that we had completed. Now turn my attention briefly to this other example of the physical world at the forefront of modern scientific interest, which is the quantum computation information processing systems. So we attempted the graph theoretic quantum field modeling. Here I also attempt to relate it to what Professor Anand Rao was referring to in his tutorial talk earlier in the morning. That is Professor Mo Jamshidi's system of systems. It's not quite a large-scale system which would qualify as a system of systems. That would be system of subsystems. From what Professor Mo Jamshidi said and what is reproduced here, from the control problem point of view, the difficulty arises that each system's control strategy cannot depend solely on its own onboard sensory information, but also due to communication links among all the neighboring systems or between sensors, controllers, and actuators. The main challenge in design of a controller for system of systems is the difficulty or impossibility of developing a comprehensive model either analytically or through simulation. By and large, some control paradigms should be available if such a mathematical model could be developed. In the framework of physical system theory, we look at the quantum information computation systems as having an across variable, which is a unit pointing like directional vector, such as ket0 and ket1. Those familiar with quantum computing know this pretty well. And the true variable becomes the probability parameters for quanta of information or computation data or energy flow rates. For example, qubits per second per unit surface. This is an example of a circuit for teleporting a qubit. There is a paper which will be presented in one of the sessions of the conferences where I happen to be the third author, along with first author as Dr. Vishal Sahni and second author as his research scholar, Ms. Dayalpari Srivastava. And I'm the third author. However, since writing that paper, we have finalized something which would seem to qualify as being in the area of system of systems. And I point out how as I go along. Here we have a quantum CNOT gate at the sending end, followed by a quantum Hadamard gate, followed by quantum measurements, which, as we all know, collapse into one of the probable states. So it no longer remains a quantum phenomenon. It reduces to a classical state with the measurement which is done. The famous Schrodinger's cat example is there. And then at the receiving end we have the controller and actuator in the form of the poly IXZ XZ gates for 4 probable states, depending on what the measurement throws up. So there is a problem here, as you notice, of telecommunication, of the measurement that is done, and at the moment that is feasible only through classical channels of communication. It's not feasible through quantum channels of communication. So right now it would have to be done through classical channels of communication. And this is just as well because those reduce to classical states. At the sending end, what is applied as information or supplied as information is the qubit to be transported. Let's say ket psi equal to alpha ket 0 plus beta ket 1, where alpha and beta are the probability parameters. And alpha squared would be the probability of the information flowing along the pointing like vector ket 0. And beta squared similarly is the probability of the information flowing rather along the other ket 1 vector than the ket 0 vector. So these are the 2 probable states for the qubit to take. And then the other thing which is applied at the 2 other ports is the quantum entangled Bell state, one of the Bell states, beta 00. I'll not go into the mathematics of it, it would take too long to explain these, and this would perhaps be presented in the other paper that I have referred. So we have at the sending end the Norman boundary condition, which is in the form of a current source or a through variable source or a flow variable source. Y variables are specified, as you notice here, at the extreme left in the top. And then we have the transfer function models of the subsystems at the y10 is equal to transfer function of the C0 gate times y at the 0 level, and so on. Then we have the transfer function for the Hadamard gate. The more interesting part arises when we come to the transfer function between levels 2 and 3, where at the level 3 we make a measurement, and there is a nonlinearity, and the quantum states reduce to classical states and give rise to 4 different measurement models. So it's like 4 systems being generated from one system. So this is how I call it system of systems, because 2 essential things involved are that there is telecommunication of these signals, which is involved here. Teleportation requires telecommunication. And the other is that we are not working with a deterministic phenomenon. We have a probabilistic system. When we are using quantum theory, it's a probabilistic system. Thirdly, we find that we have 4 different models generated from one single model once we take measurements. And similarly, we have 4 different control models for the 4 types of Pauli gates for processing the qubit at the sending end, so as to make it error-free, make it the same qubit as has been supplied at the sending end. These are in fact the subsystem transfer functions. Now you might wonder that I've talked about a nonlinear subsystem already here, or nonlinear system of systems. How do I come up with transfer function for the whole system? There's a bit of a trick which is involved here, and that trick consists in putting in parameter alpha or beta, and then after measurement making it either 0 or identically equal to 1 as the measurement would require, because one of the probable states will prevail. So in this manner we get an overall transfer function four different overall transfer functions, and each one of them would give us the same teleported qubit. As you notice, what we get at the 3 ports is 1 and 1 at the, which is showing the classical bit communication at the first 2 ports, and then at the 3rd port at the sending end we have alpha get 0 plus beta get 1, which is what we had desired to teleport. So in all the 4 models with different parameters, you would come up, as you notice, we have 4 different overall transfer functions, T00, T10, T01, T11. And in each case, we would come up with the same end result of the desired qubit. So I believe that this is a significant result in modeling a system of systems, a difficult and complex system qualified by quantum phenomena, and presenting a transfer function model for it. Well, there are other implications. I'll not go into it. I now turn my attention to more relevant things, socially relevant things once again, which is what we are trying to do now. Very recently, the earlier exercise of consensus building that I had referred to was done 5 years back. This has been done barely 3 months back, 3 or 4 months back. This is the policy design and action plan for holistic development of Raja Barari Timani tribal community for better worldliness. And this is a 5-year plan for the period 2009 to 2014. Once again, this is being presented in the form of a paper by Mishra et al. In session 1A following the inaugural session. So I have not gone into the details. I would merely mention here that here we have 9 different sectors for development on which consensus has been built with regard to the objectives, with regard to the constraints, and with regard to the probable solutions. And work has already begun in implementing these. The work has started to translate this into practice in the Raja Barari Timani forest area, which we would like to see develop, as an eco-forest area. Similarly, we are wanting to develop the Albag as an eco-village. When the Albag was founded about 95 years ago by Sir Sahibji Maharaj, it was in a rural setting, and it was about a couple of miles from the Agra city. However, since then, the Albag is surrounded on 3 sides by totally haphazard and highly dense settlements. This loop that you see represents the river Yamuna, which surrounds us here in the Albag. This is Dayalbagh. And the loop which surrounds it on three sides, north on the top and east and west on the two sides, is River Yamuna. It's only in the north that we have a relatively green and open area. Between Dayalbagh and including Dayalbagh, between and including Dayalbagh and River Yamuna on the north, we have a relatively open and green area. And this is what we want to preserve. And we are being assisted in this process by the Society for Preservation of Healthy Ecology, Environment and Heritage of Agra. This society is SFIHA, ably chaired by Mr. Pathan, who is here in the audience, and assisted largely by the expertise available at DEI in terms of scientific and other support, is spearheading this project and trying to get the clearances required for the environmental clearances required from union and state governments. So here's what I've mentioned about this society. And these are some of the proposed projects by SFIHA. They have already done the environmental impact assessment and submitted it to the state government. The union government is pretty well inclined to support this project. And we are willing to go it alone by ourselves too. But the regulations will prevent further exploitation and haphazard development outside Dayalbagh. So this is what we would like to achieve through recognition by the federal and state governments of Dayalbagh as an eco-village area to be preserved so. This is how we wish to tackle the water problem. In the recent issue of the Scientific American, there was an article on WWS technologies for energy, wind, water and solar. And the authors of this article claim that WWS technology indeed could provide a path to sustainable energy by 2030. And it's quite revealing to see that power needed worldwide in 2030, if conventional supply is used, is 16.9 terawatt. Whereas if renewable supply, which is more efficient, is used, it would be mere 11.5 terawatt. So there's already a considerable saving by switching to renewable supply sources such as wind, water and solar energy. And Professor Kalra made a reference to it in the context of IIT Rajasthan at Jodhpur. I have nostalgic memories of Jodhpur, which I found as a very hospitable city with a very salutary environment, although I spent only a year and a half there. But that was a delightful period. This is another kind of application which we have undertaken quietly. Long ago, we had some adherents of Radhaswami faith in Sri Lanka also. But with the appearance of terrorists there in the form of Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, and the Sri Lankan territory becoming rather inhospitable, particularly to Tamilians and not so much to North Indians like us here, but for South Indians it was fairly unsafe to travel there. And most of the adherents of Radhaswami faith were Tamil-speaking people there, not Sinhalese. Sinhalese have their Buddhist religion which they follow. But Tamil-speaking people, there were some, and we had our branches there, satsang branches there. We in fact had an association for Sri Lanka, regional association for Sri Lanka, but it all lay dormant for a number of years when LTTE was holding sway in the region. So our presence was next to nothing. When both my predecessors and I made an attempt to reach out to these people, particularly around 2006, summer of 2006, when LTTE was in its peak ascendancy, and the hapless Tamilians were doubly victims of both these LTTE terrorists as well as the Sri Lankan armed forces, because they were suspicious of their loyalties. So they had a very difficult time there. They still have a very difficult time, but much better now. So at that time, we took recourse to this spirit-to-spirit contact. We could not have made physical contact. So we said that, all right, if this is right what we believe in, it should be possible to establish this contact. And this is why I said we made an audio connection, reached out to them, began transmitting audio, video, information regarding our prayer meetings on special occasions. And this brought them back into the fold. And from what we learned through them, this helped them to weather the crisis period considerably more courageously, and keeping their spirits high and believing that the times would change. And they did change. In 2009, the armed forces of Sri Lanka were able to eliminate LTTE, and now the life is much better for Sri Lankan Tamils over there. However, still, even from the account given by the Sri Lankan government, there were as many as 300,000 Tamilians who were in the shelters, displaced because of the conflict between civil war that had been going on for so long between armed forces of Sri Lanka and the LTTE terrorists, neither of whom cared much for the innocent Tamilian population. Unfortunately, although we would like to claim that the government of India tries to protect all its citizens, people of Kashmir have been also in similar situation. No longer so. Now they have a much better situation there. But at one time when terrorists had their heyday there, armed forces were equally suspicious of people in Kashmir, particularly those with Islamic faith, and this led to some persecution, which is unfortunate. So we are not blaming the government of Sri Lanka for what happened, but it was because of this terrorism that in order to fight the terrorism successfully, some atrocities were perpetrated even on the innocent civilian population. So we hope to repeat similar experience of contacting Tamilians in general by organizing prayer meetings in the camps and bringing them this hope for rekindling their spirits and keeping them high enough. Sri Lankan government maintains that now there are only 130,000 people left in the camps. Rest of them have moved to their original abodes. So that is the project which we hope would be taken up in future. These are some of the references. I have gone much beyond my time limit, I suppose, but still, this is where I stop. Thank you very much.